basically, for every derivatives contract out there, there's a buyer and there's a seller. And as long as you have liquidity of both the buyer and the seller, they are both in liquid positions, then presumably these trades can be settled, because obviously whoever loses will win then. It's only when you lose a counterparty that then this becomes a problem.
That's the assignment problem that you're talking about. So if basically Lehman's writes a contract to Barclays, that's fine. But if Barclays sells the contract to a hedge fund in the Cayman Islands, Lehman doesn't know where its counterparty risk sits then. And the Cayman Islands hedge fund might sell it to a Japanese bank, who might sell it back to another Cayman Islands hedge fund.
How on earth would a regulator have been able to actually follow this track?
Because if you assign the trade and it trades on an exchange, then you would have to have reported that assignment to the regulator and therefore to the exchange. So whoever bought the contract would always know who his counterparty was. But in a paper market, I have bought this insurance from Barclays, which I'm comfortable with.
This is an OTC problem rather than a listed problem.
Exactly. If it had been listed, the guy who bought the contract would always know who his counterparty is. But at the moment, that person may or may not have just disappeared, or he may not even exist anymore, because the contracts were written on paper, they weren't netted, they weren't settled properly, etc. So that's part of the reason why this particular segment of the options market is opaque and is
disturbing. Hi everybody, just wanted to do a quick update. Obviously the markets have recovered a little bit, 14% up in Asia, 11% up in the United States, 8% yesterday, plus 5% today in Europe, today being Tuesday 14th of October. As I said to you on my video on Friday, I expected the markets to bounce 20% from their lows. I don't believe that this is an opportunity to buy across the board. I think we've got a lot worse news ahead of us. We're at the beginning of a storm, not at the end, even though I read in different websites. Just give you a headline here off of the financial news on Yahoo. It says global stocks fly as crisis eases. No, the crisis doesn't ease, or it eases for a very short term, but it's going to get much worse before it gets much better. The reality is that you know, you can trade these markets in volatile times, and so you can trade them, and if you're a clever enough trader, you may well make a good deal of money, and if you're not so clever, you may lose a lot of money. But the aspect of these markets going up is not the case. I want to bring you back to the chart that I showed of 1929. Very similar thing happened. A couple of months of the market going down 40-50%, and then a big rally of 30% upwards. And I think that's what we've got currently going on. So let's have a look at that chart and what I said on Friday.
Okay, I don't know how well you can see this chart. I've brought it up on my computer, and what I want you to focus on is this drop here. What you see is that you have a 40%, almost 50% decline in the Dow back in 1929, and that took place in a relatively short period of time, a couple of months. And then what you see is that the Dow upticks back up another 20-30%, almost half a retracement of where it fell from. Now, you'll then see that it wasn't, you know, an ongoing chart upwards. It then went back down, hit a similar low before it bounced again, excuse me, where it actually found some support. Then all of a sudden started to tick back down again, and it took almost 2.5 years for the Dow to hit its low in 1932.
Okay people, what I want you to realise is that we move now into a scenario where the world will change. The credit system has to come to an end. Everybody knows and are getting more and more aware of the falseness of money. So we have a chance to evolve and move away from the aspect of using a interest credit bearing system. We also have the opportunity to move away from pure greed on a human level. And I believe in something called almost telescopic evolution. It's not telescopic evolution that I agree with wholeheartedly, but it's the aspect of how the human race and life itself progresses at a much faster rate than it did previously. If you look at the Earth's existence, 2 billion years, you then have 6 million years of humanoid existence, then 100,000 years of human existence, 10,000 years for the agricultural revolution, 450 years for the scientific revolution, 150 years for the industrial revolution, a decade or so for the internet and technology revolutions that are currently going on. And you can see that time gets narrower and narrower and narrower all of the time. And it's the ability for us to tap in to knowledge, a knowledge database that's out there in the intuition world, when I say the intuition world, I just feel that you'll find that discoveries tend to happen all at once in the same fields. And call that God, call that the Great Spirit, call that whatever you want to call it. The reality is we are evolving. And I think we've got to the stage now where this crisis will bring around great change. I know a lot of people consider it to be biblical end games. I don't know whether that's the case. You know, maybe you take the Bible literalistically. I take it more as an allegoric story where you can actually get the aspect of how you should live your life. Likewise, I find that with other canon of scripture as well. I'm not literalistic in that sense. I believe the messages are good and clear and enable us to evolve, but I don't necessarily see it as literalistic. I think what we need to do is have an open mind about whether that's literalistic or allegoric. Either way, I don't think we should try and interfere in those spiritual events. If there is a second coming, then let Jesus choose the time that he comes in his own time, and be as prepared as you can be. And the lessons of being prepared is the lessons of actually living a good life, a life that's moral, and a life that isn't just centered on self. And I think we have this opportunity to get away from these markets that have just been interest-bearing, profit-related for some, poverty for others. Remember, we live in the Western world, and that means that we live in the top, doesn't matter how poor you are in the Western world, it means you live in the top 20% of people on the face of the earth. In fact, so when we look around the earth, and I was watching on factualtv.com the other day, the dollar a day series, and this is different parts of the world that live on $1 a day, and you know, you could have chosen different places to physically look at. You could have looked at how they make money in the Bombay jungles, and how they make money in China for Walmart and places along those lines, cotton and so forth. I chose to look at the aspect of the dollar a day scenario proves that what happens in the West isn't what happens throughout the world. Of course, there's great riches in parts of these worlds. The Bolivians talked about the unfairness of the gas situation. You've got Chavez in Venezuela talking about the mixture of wealth there, and you can believe whether he's there to help the people or not. I haven't really made up my mind. But what I do know is imperialism and capitalism continues, and as that continues, the reality is we lose touch with our spirits. And that's why I want to focus my channel on now. I don't want to look too much at the financials. They're history. It may take years for them to be history. This bounce may last for a couple of months. But they'll continue to go down, and there's not enough money in the system to pay everyone, so there will be pain in the system, and that pain enables change. And that's what I want to focus on, change. How we put out there an idea of change that brings around a better world, not for those just in the West, but for all humanity. And all of the scriptural references, you know, whether you look in the Hindu scriptures, in the Christian scriptures, the Islamic scriptures, whether you look in the Gnostic traditions, are all about helping your fellow men and how to actually connect with your soul, and that's what I want to look at. So I'm going to come up, as I mentioned on Friday, with some ideas, and I'm going to maybe interview a few people who have some ideas as well, and I want us to look at ways to overcome this unfair interest-bearing system. It's been exposed to the world. It's not going to turn back. People are aware of it. It's out there now, and that will have to change. And so yes, you can make short-term money trading these markets, and yes, you can short the long bond, and you may well do well because of hyperinflationary effects. I mean, you can see here in the United Kingdom inflation surges. We will have a deflationary period of time before we move into an inflationary period of time. As everyone sells their assets, you've got inflation going down. But that's not going to last. You know, as the money gets printed and the debts get paid off, then inflation goes back up and currencies become worthless. And I look forward to those times. I look forward to the times where people are actually reminded of who they are, that human beings are human beings first and foremost, that we have the necessity for air and water and food, and we have the necessity to help one another and grow communities and grow consciousness, and not gain just profit alone. While profits, I understand, is important in the world that we live in, you know, sometimes we need to just get off that wheel of living and get on the wheel of actually growing. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to change things to that scenario of things. I hope you stay with me. I'm grateful for everybody who's subscribed, grateful for people who leave comments and so forth. You know, be careful out there. Remember to get in touch with who you are and find groups of people to evolve this consciousness as it goes forward.